You're listening to or watching the Creative Assembly Podcast, a podcast about creatives and their process for creatives who want to make stuff. Hi, I'm Sine, and I write shows about religion, sing songs about dildos, and make up stuff in front of audiences to show people that it is possible to create a life that's rad. On this show, you'll learn all about other people's creative processes so that you can discover your own. Step one is easy. All you gotta do is sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Today, I am interviewing Tamar Broadbent, the most prolific comedy and musical writer I have literally ever met. In today's episode, we'll break down why you shouldn't be ashamed to have a full-time job while you do creative work. We'll talk about how to create stuff while living with other people, and we'll talk about the most destructive force to creativity and how to overcome it. All that and so much more on today's episode. I am here with the wonderful and amazing and hilarious Tamar Broadbent. Question number one, Tamar, can you tell all of the people watching, whoever they are, what it is that you do?
Well, I am a creator and a performer. So I write comedy and scripts and songs, and I make shows, and I've done a whole bunch of musical comedy shows. I've also written a play, I've written musicals, and I'm a big creative person. We met, me and Snay met when we were working at an improv theatre for 2 years, so I'm also an improviser. General all-round person trying to bring good vibes through comedy and writing.
How did you get into doing comedy writing?
From after I went to university, I went to drama school for a year, and when I left drama school, I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to sit around waiting for auditions because I just felt like that wasn't, I'm not that kind of person, and also who's going to come along and just give you a big role. And so I decided to just start creating. And I heard of somebody else doing musical comedy, and I didn't really know that it existed. I'd written musicals before and songs, but when I heard that someone I knew was doing it, I was like, oh, I could give that a go. And I replied to something on Twitter that said, there's a spot available in Brighton for a all-female stand-up night. Anyone free? And I replied to it, total blag, and was like, yeah, I'm free and I can do it. And then they were like, great, come on down. And then I had 2 days, and in 2 days I wrote like a 10-minute musical comedy set, just went and did it. And that's how I first started doing comedy.
Wait, so your first job doing, like your first time you ever did comedy was for a job, number one. And then number two, like how did you have the confidence to just like be like, yeah, I can write 10 minutes of something in the next 2 days and perform it in front of all these people having never done it before?
I think that's the beauty of being a beginner and having no idea how the world works. And I've been watching Sarah Blakely's masterclass, and she said when she started her business, Spanx, she had no idea how the industry worked. And so she did things that people who were a part of the industry wouldn't think to do. Like everyone had to go and do trade shows and show their clothes, and she just called the person in charge and was like, hi, can I see you? And that person was like, yeah, okay. And everyone was like, oh my God, how did you do it? She was like, I don't know. I just thought that. And so it was like, I think that's what happens when you become a part of the world. You think, oh no, these are the ways that you have to do things. You have to go through this person, and you have to do a 5-minute set and be seen. And then after a year or 2 years, then you'll be paid for gigs. And I just had no idea. I just saw this tweet and was like, yeah, why not? And I think that's how I ended up getting that opportunity, because I just didn't know. I didn't know how it worked. And so I just flagged my way in.
I love that you're just like, yeah, okay, I can do it. No evidence, but sure.
No evidence whatsoever. Just positivity and enthusiasm.
Okay, my next question is, this is more of like a businessy question. Is all your income full-time from creative work, or do you also supplement your income with other work also?
It's a tough time for me to answer that question, because we've just gone into having all the work cancelled because people can't be together. But when previously I've done just so many different things. Before I went to Amsterdam to work at the improv theatre, I had a couple of days of work a week, which weren't performing but were arts related. And then the rest of the money I made was through performing and writing. And now the money I make is through performing and also other creative avenues such as workshops or corporate things. And so kind of a mixture, I'd say. But I mean, it's a funny time right now.
Yeah, it's such a hard question to ask also because I'm aware. I'm like, oh yeah, everything's getting canceled, so no one's making any money.
Yeah, I wonder whether everything will go back to being exactly the same or whether things are going to change. I have no idea at the moment. It's really bizarre though how I've realized how much what we do relies on being able to be with other people. And I think probably like, you know, that's done because that's the way the whole world works. But I just didn't realize how grateful I was that we could go and stand up in front of a group of people and do a show, or that we could be in a room full of people and teach a workshop. And now that's been taken away. And like, you know, you really don't appreciate the things you've got until you don't have them anymore and don't have access to them. So I really hope that comes back.
Fingers crossed. I think at some version of that, it will definitely come back. And at the same, like human beings can't be isolated from each other for that long without all of us just going crazy. So how do you find your clients or your customers, or do they find you?
At present, I've been being found, and I was like about to do a flip and kind of start actively looking for things. But I think because I've been around in the industry for like 8 years now in London, you are like you have connections like that you don't even know you had. Like people will call me and say, hey, remember when we did that thing together 5 years ago? I've got this opportunity. And that's really super exciting. It's like how they say you never know what your path is until you look back on it. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because that led from that with an activity that I didn't immediately know would have any consequences. And now 6 years later, it's led to another job. But I think even though like at the moment, a lot of people have been finding me to do things, I think it's good to have a mixture of going out there and trying to find it yourself. And also you will have built up paths where people, you know, will remember you.
Yeah. How do most of these people find you from having worked with you in the past, or are they like finding stuff that you've done online, or like roughly what's the common sort of trajectory for someone who wants to work with you?
I think a bit of both, and it depends on in what capacity. So the musical that I'm working on that I wrote the book for is because my first Edinburgh show, my first comedy show, is produced by a guy called Andy Barnes, who runs Perfect Pitch and now Global Musicals. And then a few years later, he asked me to be a writer on a project that they had. So that's one way that, you know, that led on through writing musical theatre. Then in terms of comedy, you know, I've been around the circuit for many years doing kind of open spots for promoters. And I was abroad for 2 years, and now I've come back getting in touch with those people again, or they get in touch with me and say, do you want to come and do this gig here? So there's an element of being around and those people coming to find me. But I'm also always pursuing things. Like if I'll see opportunities on the internet, I'd like to apply for them or use it to inspire me to work on a new skill.
What was the turning point for you when you knew like, oh, I could really do this as like a job? Do you remember that? Or like, was it a moment, or was it just kind of like a series of things that happened?
I think in comedy in the UK, the path that I understood to exist was that you did a 5-minute spot, and then if they like your 5-minute spot, you do a 10-minute spot. And if they like your 10-minute spot, you can come back and do a 20-minute spot, and then they'll pay you. And then all over England, you will be paid to do a 20-minute comedy set. And so when I was 22, 23, just finishing like full-time education, I could see an immediate path to money that felt like, you know, the further you went, the more it turned into a job. And I think that's the benefit of gig comedy as opposed to like theatre. So I don't think there is that clear move up in theatre. It's like you can be doing a show and then not do a show for a year and, you know, not actually have that same path. So that's when I first recognized it could be a job. But realistically, I've never been able to go full time on the circuit, and I don't think I'd want to. I love doing lots of different things and doing gigs, but also doing other writing projects and doing workshops and teaching improv and like putting all that together to make my full time income.
Yeah, that seems to be, at least from who we know and like who I've talked to as well, we all kind of like are piecing together a lot of different creative work in order to sort of make this whole ideally livable, not always, version of income. So
100%. And also, through improv, like how many people who do improv are also actuaries or insurance brokers, or they work in the government and have full-time whole other lives. And then on top of that, they're also a performing comedian. And so think about improv really isn't something that long form improv isn't necessarily something that makes money unless it's through a school. And so you're really doing that for the love and the joy of it. And I think that would be much harder than stand-up to kind of make a living performing with.
What time of day do you have the most energy to create?
Well, the endless question. The life of the self-employed person. I don't know. I think probably first thing in the morning, and then I have a wave at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Afternoons are very difficult for me.
Yeah.
And then I read something. Oh no, I think I heard a talk by a guy called Daniel Pink who talked about the science of timing, and he was like, everybody works bad, or most people work terribly in the afternoon. And he said you should never go to the doctor in the afternoon for that reason. Because statistically, like, more mistakes get made in the afternoon at the hospital. Although I don't know how that makes sense with like shift work, because some doctors must be on for like, anyway. But I feel like I'm one of those people who I just can't do anything in the afternoon, but then I get this real creative wind in the evening where it's much more likely I'll sit down and start digging into writing at that time of day.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Then there's also like, if you're coming to a script that already exists and working on it, I find it easy to work on it any time of day. It's starting something that is always really, really difficult. And I feel like I say to myself, I have to have a cup of tea, or I have to have a glass of wine to just do something loosely. And she got a cup of tea. She got a coffee. She got herself a coffee. Yeah, it's like, I feel like it's so hard to do anything without that. And yet we know that we don't need it.
Yeah.
But it's really hard not to.
It's so hard not to.
What about you? What is your best time in the day?
Very similar. So I usually have like spurts in the morning where I can do a lot of work. Now I'm starting to notice the morning is when I'm really good at admin type stuff. Any sort of detail oriented, repetitive task, I crush in the morning. Problem is I don't wake up in the morning. So then I just bypass that time. And then I'm probably the most creative like in the evening and then into sort of late in the night before I fall asleep.
Oh, you're one of those people. Yeah, you're the night owl of creativity.
Yeah, but the problem is I like to be alone when I'm doing stuff, and I'm never alone at those times. So then I don't end up creating because I get really in my head about like somebody's watching me.
That is a real thing of when you're living with people as well, of finding that space to be alone. Because the way like kind of, I guess, normal people's days work, or muggles, they might have like, a full day, and then evening is supposed to be like fun time. And that's when you have your day job, and then you come off and you want an evening off. But really, creative people, it never stops.
Yeah.
There's never a time when it's like your off time. And so you might want to just sit down and write a whole script in an evening, but how that matches in with the lives of the people you're living with, and it's tough sometimes.
It's really tough. I think I was probably I felt the most creatively productive when I lived alone, but I've only ever lived alone once in my life, because only once in my life did I have the means to be able to do that. And now, now I have a love.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other part. So when you're alone all the time, it's like you're busy because you're miserable as well. Like, why am I so alone? I'll write a play.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, something I've thought about a lot is, do you have to be miserable in order to be creative? And I've come out of the decision that you don't. And that is a myth. But it is harder to motivate yourself sometimes when you're in a couple, and it's much easier when you're like, you know, if you have an evening alone ahead, to be like, you know what, no, I'm going to go down and do that gig, or no, I'm going to write a play this evening, as opposed to just cuddle up with someone that you love, or chat to friends that you love.
Yeah.
It's easy when you're lonely.
It's just insane. Not to say that everybody that's single is lonely, that's not, but at the same time, when you spend a lot of time by yourself, you do get lonely, obviously.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, there are some people who are like amazing at being single and have everything under control. I don't think I was one of those people. I've never done well, like, alone. And it doesn't have to mean being in a relationship, but when I lived alone, I lived in a warehouse in London, like this abandoned, and it was such a sad time because I was just really cold and there was no central heating, and I was so productive. I did loads and loads of stuff, but I'm also really productive now, and I'm really happy. I don't know.
Yeah. A minute. Yes. So note to everybody who's watching, you can be happy and productive.
Yeah. No excuse.
Describe the type of environment you prefer to work in, like when you're being creative, in as much detail as possible. So like, what does it look like in your ideal scenario? What kind of furniture would there be? What it would smell like? What colors would there be?
It's hard to think about what my ideal is versus just what I'm dealing with at present. I think something that's very important to me is that it's clean. I really need a clean house or environment. Otherwise I can't relax. If there's stuff that needs tidying, then I'll have to get up and tidy that instead of sit down to work. Also, music, but I can't have music with words because I think that's really distractive creatively. It's hard, right? So like vibing with no words, it has to be that or nothing, or like cinematic music.
Yeah.
I like to put headphones on because that helps me zone out and just be in a world. That's if script writing. If it's like writing stand-up or writing sketches, it has to be a place where I can say things out loud. Otherwise I don't. Yeah. Privacy, I think, is pretty important, actually.
Yeah.
Either at home or in a cafe where it feels like, you know, you could say things out loud and no one would hear you or think you were weird. Colors. Oh, yeah. I think this is important because I just moved into a new place and the curtains were awful and just had to get rid of them. And I didn't realize how important like colors in the room were until that moment. So got rid of that, and now it's just like nice and calming and blue. And I think that helps, like nothing too busy.
Yeah.
Just I think it's, as long as it's pretty, that's really helpful. But yeah, I say the main thing is just that it's not messy, because then it's like just too much of a distraction and too easy to procrastinate.
Do you like to work on one project at a time or several projects at a time?
I think if I'm working on something in a day, I like to be able to get stuck into it. So honestly different. Like when I was writing a script in the summer, I was like, I want to deal with getting this done. And then I moved on to the next project, which was making my Stacey solo show. And I was like, right now, this is the thing I'm working on. So I like some separation, but at the same time, I don't like having only one thing on the go, because if there's anything I've learned is that you have to have your eggs in multiple baskets. Hands in multiple baskets? I don't know what's happening to me today. So fingers in different pies.
There we go.
Basket hands.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like this often happens to me with like YouTube videos. I'll put up a YouTube video and I have to immediately move on and just do something else, because otherwise I'll care too much about like what people think of it. And I think as an artist, it's not, your control ends when you've made it and when you've performed it. And there's just, you can't get stuck thinking about the effect that it's going to have. You got to move on and make the next thing. Because like I find that the act of creating is what brings me happiness and what brings me joy. And it's so lovely when people appreciate it, but the happiness comes from the creative process. And so I like to be doing multiple things at once.
Yeah. What do you consider as part of your like what's considered creative, and then what's considered like done? You're done creating.
I think, well, that's different depending on the art form. So I guess with a musical, it's like once I've gotten the script to where I want the script to be, I that's it. You know, then it goes to the director who's going to direct the show. and the actors who are going to perform it, and my control ends there.
Mm.
If it's a show for myself that I've written, that's a bit, it's a bit more of an ongoing process because I've written it, but then as I'm doing it live on stage, little things will change here and there. And then the creative/writing process is still going on for the duration of the run or however long I'm performing it for. Ultimately, though, there has to be a point where you stop, I think, writing it and you're just performing it. And there's a separation there. Otherwise that gets a bit complicated doing everything. Yeah. And then a song, like once you've recorded it, once you've done it, I think that's done. It's different for different things.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay, but so the best example is an improv show, right? So the purest example, once you've done an improv show, you don't think about it again after you've done it. Because it was like, It was there for those people. We created it in that moment. The audience received it how they did. And then the next day you move on and you do the next improv show. Yeah. Because it ceases to exist. You're not still worrying like 2 weeks time. Oh, I wonder what they thought of that improv show.
Unless you were me when I first started doing improv.
Oh my God. It was so hard to not like feel bad about early improv shows.
There are still things that I think about today that I'm like, if only I had done this.
I remember when I first joined the theatre and you said it will take about 6 months and then you'll stop feeling like that. And I did. It took 6 months for me to, it's just like the shame you feel, I think, when you're like, oh my God, that was so weird, that thing that I did when no one laughed at it or I got it wrong. And I used to carry that shame around and now I'm like, I don't fucking care. Yeah. I don't fucking care. At least I tried something and I took a risk. I'm so happy I'm sort of better. I think it's only sort of, but better at like dealing with failures in that sense.
Yeah.
By this point, they used to make me cry.
Oh, same. Yeah. For days.
Yeah.
Days.
There was one scene really early on when I think you said in your monologue that you ate shit. You fell off a bike and you ate shit. In American, you were saying for you that phrase means obviously just that you had an awful thing happen to you or like.
Yeah, it failed. You failed.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I took that idea and then put it in a scene and like I was on holiday wanting to eat shit. And like for whatever reason, it just didn't work at all. And I just remember being like doing a scene in front of these 200 people that was like, I just want to eat shit. Funny. And I was on the bike and being like, I'm so embarrassed that I said I wanted to eat shit. And like I'm being so hard and no one found it funny. And now I'm like this person who wants to eat shit and it's really weird. It was mortifying. And now I'm like, meh.
What's funny, I remember that scene because when you did that, I was like, brilliant. And then I was so mad I wasn't in that scene because I was like, I know exactly what to do. And then I got nervous and I didn't come out and it was too late.
Oh, God. Don't blame yourself.
I want you to know I loved that initiation and I thought it was genius. If that helps you not think about it anymore.
That does help me.
Do you prefer working from your imagination or from observation?
I'm in a middle point between those two things. I think I spent the whole of my 20s writing stuff inspired by my real life. And I loved it. And I loved doing things that way. But now I've done so much more improv and so much more character-based stuff. It's just so liberating to be able to come away from it, especially because a lot of the time when you're writing from yourself, it's, it can be the richest material and truthful and honest, but it's also pretty vulnerable and can be very hard and draining emotionally. And this also, like right now, because we're not leaving the house, I'm trying to write my journal every day and I just have nothing to say. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And so at the moment I'm starting to think of a lot more kind of like fantasy ideas or science fiction type ideas. And that's just a new wave of potential fun because then it's like, it doesn't have to honor anything true. And it also doesn't have to feel uncomfortable. Like, oh no, this person is literally this person in my life. You can just take yourself anywhere. And that's where I'm at.
How do you like to capture and record your ideas?
I have lots and lots of notebooks, and I like the idea of being a person who writes everything in a notebook. But the truth of it is I probably don't read anything in my notebooks after I've written it down. iPhone notes are really useful because then you're just carrying it around and it's so easy to write that. I do a lot of voice recordings as well of songs, and if I have an idea of a turn of phrase. So yeah, anything. I don't know if it matters too much as long as it's immediate. Like something that started happening to me a lot more as I get older is I'll think, oh my God, that's so fucking funny. I got to write that down. And then I don't. And then an hour later, I have no idea what it was. And then it's gone forever.
Forever.
You don't want to be that weird person who's like, wait a minute, I just need to write this down when everyone's out for dinner. But you gotta. I think you gotta.
Yeah. How do you, if you don't go back and read your notebooks, which I don't either, how do you decide what to push forward?
I think if I'm writing a show specifically in a notebook, then I will go back. But if I've written a show, I'll probably have like 2 full notebooks all full of ideas and thoughts, and eventually those things just turn into songs or they turn into sections, and then they kind of have a life of their own that just keeps moving forward, so it feels less necessary to go back. But in terms of ideas, I think you just know in yourself the ideas that you're like, this one keeps coming back and I want to do this one. Like I have this idea right now that I want to do. I don't know whether it's a one-woman play or it's a sitcom or it's a film or it's actually a young person's novel, but I have this idea of this story and it keeps coming back and I know I really want to do something with it, and that's not going to disappear no matter where it's written down.
Do you have a point in your process where you tend to get stuck? And then if so, how do you get out of that stuckness?
Oh God, well, I could talk about this for ages. I've been talking to this a lot with my friend John Victor, who you've met.
John,
who wrote the music for the musical, yeah. So this happened to me recently where I wrote this song and then I was just feeling negative about it, and then I still recorded it and I released it or whatever. And then like watching back on it, I think you can feel that I felt negative about the process. And I think sometimes as all creatives, we have all these like love-hate thoughts for ourselves, these like undiscovered genius, but also world's biggest fraud ideas going through your head. And so if I sit down and I create something, sometimes halfway through I'll be like, is this shit? Is this actually really shit? And I'm wasting my time. I'm going to be wasting everyone else's time. And the problem is, as soon as that thought creeps in, you've got to be, and again, this is like what I was talking about with my friend JV. He was like, you've got to be so careful of that, because if you let that in, it will affect the rest of the writing, and it will it will be underlying it in ways that you don't even realize. And so you've either got to turn that into a positive thought and just follow the fun of it, or just walk away. And I've been really aware of that, and I'll have it with writing as well. Sometimes it's about sitting down and forcing yourself to do it, but sometimes if you're not getting anywhere and you feel negativity, you have to just give up and do something else. Because often I think sitting down and forcing yourself can be more detrimental than just walking away, going for a walk, reading a bit of a book, going to do some exercise, doing anything else to kind of find joy again and inspiration again. Otherwise just flogging a dead horse. Oh, what an awful expression.
So then how do you...
I would never do that.
Please don't flog a dead horse. For those of you who are watching or listening, don't flog a dead horse.
I'm sorry.
So if you're on a project that you are getting to that point where that little voice is creeping in saying, this is shit, what are you doing? Who do you think you are? How do you know which ones that you should stop doing and be like, you know what, I don't think this is something I should keep working on, versus like, oh, I just need to push through this part, or I need to change this piece, and then you keep working with that same project? How do you know the difference between the two?
I think that there are like multiple possible answers, but the one that I think is most important is that it's you. So if you believe that there is something in a project that you are passionate about and you want to do, then you've got to continue and find a way to carry on doing it. And that's because, like, you could, if you're working halfway through a script and then you're like, oh, it might be shit, and you ask your friend and your friend's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? It's great. Keep doing it. That's great to have the inspiration from somebody else to tell you that there's something in it. But really, if you have to believe that there's something in it yourself. Otherwise, it's just not coming from the right creative place or the right reason. It's also like, it links into how I don't think you should write a show that you think other people want to see, because I think you're always going to lose. I think you, especially in the early stages when you're just trying to write and get noticed and find out who you are, all you have is who you are and what you believe in, and, you know, your authentic stories if you want to write from your own experience, or just something that you're excited about, because that's what's going to drive you through to create something great. And especially if you're like not being paid to make a solo show and you're putting all the money into it yourself, why on earth would you do something that you don't really believe in? That's not to say that it's going to be easy, especially if it's a confessional piece and you're working on something that can at times feel hard or vulnerable. You know, it might be hard and challenging. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means it's a tough process. And so the feeling has to be inside you the whole way through of like, I know that I want to make this piece. So that makes sense. It's not easy for me to clearly articulate how I feel about that, but I guess the only way you can tell is with your own instincts. Because you're the artist, you're the creator. You can't, you know, it's not like you can find a metric statistical system to tell you that the idea you've had is going to be a good idea. So who else's judgment are you going to trust apart from your own? And then the tricky thing with that is that sometimes sometimes you're less trustworthy. For example, when you're feeling down on yourself or negative about yourself, then you might throw away an idea that actually you could have made really decent because you were afraid, or you would, you know, down on yourself. So
yeah, I think a lot of us, at least I'm speaking from my own personal experience, get into that really negative headspace where we're completely doubting every decision we've ever made, from big ones down to like, you know, oh, I shouldn't have ate that today. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then that you can't create from there. And it makes sense that you don't trust your work because you don't trust yourself at that point.
Yes.
So then I think I haven't quite figured out how to bypass it. I don't think it's possible to bypass it, at least from what I've learned in therapy. You just have to like move through it. And at some point you'll find everything will click back into place.
Also, like it goes back into that idea of if you can, you should, and that you have stories that need to be heard. Like if I was talking to you and you said, I've got this idea for a show, but I'm feeling down on it and I'm not sure if I want to do it, I would be like, do it, please. I want to hear that story and you've got to show it to the world. And so it has to be a bit of like, we've got to do that to ourselves like we would do it to our best friends who are creating their stories and their shows, because it's too easy to say, oh no, it's gonna be shit. And I tell myself this as well. It's like, there are a lot of people out there with more confidence and a less interesting story, or, you know, who are doing it more and getting it out there because they really believe in it. And so you've got to do it.
Okay, so this is referring back to something you said earlier, that you like to listen to music sometimes when you are working. And you said that you like to listen to cinematic music sometimes when you're, I'm assuming you said writing, right? And if you were writing something that has a very specific tone, how do you do that when you have this piece of music coming in that also has a very specific tone?
I don't listen to music all the time. In fact, it's more likely that I would be in silence than anything else. But I think sometimes silence becomes really weirdly oppressive when you're in a creative mind space. So if you've been alone for 6 hours in a house working on a creative project and it's silent, it just suddenly feels very heavy. And so I might play some music, and all I know is that music has to not have words, otherwise it will interfere too much with what I'm doing. But the times I can remember when I'm writing scripts, for example, it's less likely that I would have music on than if I'm just spitballing some stand-up ideas. Just have something in the background. Or if I'm doing like a short story or some kind of monologue-y type things, then music in the background might be useful. But I'd say it's more likely that I wouldn't have music. Because I think you're right. I think like if you were listening to a really happy, upbeat soundtrack and then you were trying to write something sad, or I mean it's as simple as like sometimes if you're trying to get sexy and then a weird song comes on and you're like, okay, this is wrong. It's so like so important, and it's like that when you're writing as well. You just be like, fuck, this is weird.
Do you have any habits or rituals you like to do before you start working? And I know you mentioned like having a clean workspace and getting some tea. Is that part of it? Is there more, or is that kind of like base level?
Tea's a really big one. I think having a cup of tea to start. Also, I like this thing where you do half an hour of free writing. So you start the day by writing for half an hour. That has like, that struggled for me since like being stuck inside the house. I'm finding that harder. But I feel like that's a really good ritual to get into. And then just waking up and getting straight on with it, I find is pretty important. If I get into a habit of like putting it off even for a little bit, I tend to sometimes just end up wasting the whole day. And it feels like if I haven't started straight away, then I can't start later on, which is dumb because you can restart the day at any point. I really like the advice that inspiration is just the act of pulling the chair up to the desk.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I read, and there was another one as well in this book I just read saying, I can't remember who got asked, but it's like, how did you write all of these novels that you wrote? And he was just like 600 shitty words a day. And he was like, that's how you do it. It's just doing it, because the mere act of doing something will get you closer to it. Yeah. And so I think that's also a good, if you can live by that and just do it, that's great. Although that is that does counter what I said earlier about, if it's not working, then don't do it and walk away. I don't know.
I don't know. None of us know.
No one knows. Just gotta give it a go.
We're all just guessing at this point.
Yeah, we totally are.
When do you generally come up with your most creative ideas? Is it a time of day? Is it a time of year? Is it a season? Who knows? When do you come up with your most creative idea?
I think that's probably the most elusive one. I wouldn't be able to pinpoint the moment, but what I do know is that, again, the ideas that are really clear stick with you. So my idea for my show, Stacey Solo, I came up with like July time, and I just knew what it would look like from the moment that I thought of the idea. And then I tried to explain it to people, and just nobody understood or seemed to think it was a good idea. So then I kept it to myself. And I was like, I don't want other people to ruin this for me, because I know that it's a great idea inside my head. And so then I went away, worked on it, wrote it, created it. But that one, like, that idea had been playing on my mind for a while before I did it. And it just stuck. And I've got the same at the moment with this other idea that I want to work on. So I think, but I don't know, but I think it's like, we can't underestimate free time as well. So the time when you just sit around for an hour doing nothing, like a lot of my early 20s was spent just lying in bed staring at the wall, which sounds so privileged. And I am from a middle class background, and I did do an English degree, so I had 6 hours of contact a week at university and a lot of time to just lie in bed doing nothing. But I think as a creative, that time is important, and that's the time that I used to beat myself up for and be like, you could have been doing this, or you could have been out, like, there's so much stuff you could have done in that time. You could have learned the violin. I was really mean to myself for not learning the violin. But actually that time is really important to let your mind wander and imagine things, because like so much is happening in there that it's important to rebrand that as valuable time, I think.
Yeah. I don't think.
What about you? What about your ideas?
Yeah, my ideas feel real random when they come, because they tend to either all come at once, and then I can't work on really any of them at, at the same time, because it's just impossible. And then I'll hold on to it for a little while. I'll get another batch of ideas, another batch of ideas. And then at some point I pick one and then I run with it. But it's very rare when I have the confidence to take one of my own ideas and run with it. So I would say my ideas typically come probably like every 6 months is when I have a big batch of random ideas. And then I'll go through a period where I have nothing. Just I can't think of anything. And then if I pick one and run with it, what I like to do is try to just get it done as fast as possible. But I'm noticing that's getting harder as I get older, and I don't know why yet. And I don't know if that has to do with the fact that I am very introverted and I get really nervous asking for help and like reaching out to people, or what the deal is, but I'm still figuring that out.
I think because I've experienced the same thing. For me, it's about, how much work goes into these things now. So I think it's the same as like when I applied for that first stand-up gig, I was like, yeah, I can do it. And then just wrote a 10-minute set. It would take me a lot longer to write a 10-minute set now because I know more about the world and how it's done. And also when you embark upon creating a show, you're aware of like how much time, how much research, how many rewrites have to go into that. So it is harder to commit to an idea, I think, the more experience that you have. And but then that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you don't want to go down a road if you're not like 100% sure about that idea and being passionate about it.
Yeah, that's true. Nowadays I won't, not always, but there's some stuff I won't do just to do. There are things I will do just to do, like improv will always be that. But if I'm like, for example, gonna write a scripted show, I have to be doing it for a reason.
Yeah.
But that's just, maybe the reason is I just want to have fun. Yeah. Which I haven't done yet. I want to. But I've only written 2 shows, and they've both been because I was like, I have to say this thing. There's this thing I need to say. And so then I'm like, all right, let me go in and do all the work for it.
That's so exciting. And then also you have that thing, even when you doubt yourself along the process, you're like, why am I doing this? Because I have this thing that I want to say. And then the challenges or obstacles won't feel like the end of the world, because you still have that thing driving you through as an objective and an incentive.
If you could break your creative process down into stages, what are those stages for you, and what do they look like?
So like writing a song or writing a show. So I'm doing like mini songs at the moment. And what will happen with those is I want to do them very quickly. So I'll get an idea for a song, be like, right, I'm going to follow the fun of it. The idea will come first. Then I go to the piano, jam out like some very simple basic chords, sing a bit over the top of it, film it, get it done. With a show, it's like similar to that, but bigger. So it will be, what's the idea? And then the time goes into like thinking a lot about that idea. Then what could it look like? What's the form? So much kind of just like blowing out the world. Then first draft, go away from it. Second draft. And it depends then what type of show it is. Like with Stacey Solo, I didn't do it as much in front of an audience as I have with other comedy shows, where I would put them up, see what was funny, edit it that way. I think when it's more story narrative or kind of theatrical based, much more time is spent on the page getting the story right and behind closed doors before you let an audience in. And then you start putting it on its feet and making it what it is that way.
Do you have any like must read books, articles, blogs, podcasts, like any of that? Is there anything you're just like, oh, if everybody could listen to these things or watch these things or read these things, they need to do that?
Right now, I just finished this book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, and I loved it.
So good.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
Fucking love it. It spoke to me so much. All about like, oh my God, there's just too much of it that spoke to me. But again, this idea of happiness and values, and like, that if you're an artist, the happiness comes from creating. It doesn't come from like what people think of your work and like hanging around afterwards to like, because you can't control that. What you can control is just, you know, you putting out the best piece of work that you believe you can, then you give it to the world, and you know, and then you move on and you create another piece, and don't get hung up on that. And also this whole idea of like, you have to be obsessed with failure and improving if you want to get really good at something. And I think we feel as adults as like, oh, we should be experts by now, or we should like know stuff. And actually that is detrimental, because as soon as you're acting like you're somebody who knows what they're doing, you're not listening for ways that you can improve and get better. And it should always be, there's something so liberating about saying, you know what, I'm bad at this and I want to learn to get better. It's so liberating, rather than having to pretend to be a master. Oh yeah, anyway, I loved that. And also there's a podcast that I really like called The Pleasure Podcast, and yeah, it's really, really good. It's from two amazing people in London. You should Google it and check it out.
What are you the most proud of creating up to now, and why?
I think I would say my latest show. I think I'd say Stacey Solo. And I think that's because I'm the most proud of whatever I've just created. Because I feel like each time I create something, that's the one that I'm in love with and I'm passionate about and it's special, and I'm moving forward every time I create something. In a year's time, it might be different. That's different to when, like, I did make one show that I kind of threw together in a month, and I was like, nah, I'm not sure about this one. But I'm going to keep doing it because I got to do it for a whole month. But yeah, I'm really proud of this latest one because it's just fun. And like you're talking about the different intentions for shows, and this new one I'm going to work on is like more of a story and more of an exploration of a theme. But Stacey Solo was just about joy and characters and being silly and, you know, exploring themes in some way of like the strong female lead, but mostly just joy. And I'm really proud of it. I'm so proud. I'm really proud of it.
You should be proud. It's so funny. It's so funny. Okay, well, I have one final, this is our last round of questions, but it's a quick round. This is, when I say inspired by, what I really mean is ripped off of. Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, he does this last round of questions where when he asks it, you just have to answer with your first instinct. Okay. It doesn't have to be like long or anything, just like first instinct that comes to your mind. And okay. That's it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 1 is, what is your favorite word?
Sublime.
What's your least favorite word?
Squelch.
What turns you on?
My boyfriend's penis.
What turns you off?
Feeling like dirty. So like muddy or sweaty or feeling dirty.
Good one. What sound or noise do you love?
The sea.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Screaming.
What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck!
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
Journalism.
Nice. What profession would you not like to do?
Insurance.
And final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Come here and let me give you a big hug.
Oh. Tamar Broadbent, my love, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Thanks for talking to me. It was really fun.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening or watching. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know over on Instagram @SaneATX. And hopefully you'll take what you've learned today and use it to create something of your own, because you owe it to yourself and to us to to put your ideas out into the world. Thanks again.